Every decade has its own share of throwaway novelty singles, but the 1970s and 80s somehow turned genuinely bizarre, seemingly unmarketable ideas into real, honest-to-goodness hits, complete with gold records, national television appearances, and steady radio airplay that in some cases lasted for months at a stretch. Nobody involved quite planned for songs about mating rodents or dancing seafood to genuinely take over the airwaves, yet somehow, against all odds, they did exactly that. So today, we're counting down You Won't Believe People. Listen to these 12 weird songs in the 70s and 80s. Number 12, Dead Skunk by Loudon Wainwright III. Released in 1972 on his third studio album, fittingly titled Album 3. This folk rock single became singer-songwriter Loudon Wainwright III's only major mainstream hit, climbing to number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 that spring, with lyrics describing, in surprisingly upbeat and cheerful detail, the unmistakable smell of a dead skunk slowly decomposing in the middle of a rural road. Wainwright has said in interviews over the years that the song came together remarkably quickly, in a matter of minutes, after he personally encountered the unfortunate animal during an otherwise ordinary drive through Westchester County, New York, and decided on the spot that its overwhelming odor genuinely deserved a proper musical tribute of its own.
Crossing the highway late last night.
Despite its distinctly unglamorous subject matter, the catchy, banjo-driven arrangement helped the song find a genuine audience on mainstream pop radio, an unusual crossover moment for an artist who was otherwise known for wry, introspective folk material. Wainwright went on to a long and genuinely respected career in music and occasional television and film acting, later winning a Grammy Award decades afterward for a completely different, far more serious album of original material, and his son, Rufus Wainwright, and daughter, Martha Wainwright, both went on to build their own successful, critically acclaimed music careers in their own right, despite that broader, multi-generational family legacy in music. This one particular single, built entirely around roadkill found on the side of a highway, remains by far the best-known recording of his entire catalog to casual listeners who only know him from the radio. Number 11, Monster Mash by Bobby Boris Pickett and the Crip Kickers.
He did the Monster Mash.
The Monster Mash.
Originally released in the summer of 1962 and topping the Billboard Hot 100 that October, just days before Halloween, this novelty song, built around lead singer Bobby Pickett's uncanny Boris Karloff impression describing a graveyard dance party thrown by classic movie monsters, proved far too strange and beloved to simply fade quietly away after its initial run on the charts. The song re-entered the Billboard charts in August 1970, peaking at a fairly modest number 91 that time around, before an even bigger, more dramatic resurgence in May 1973 sent it all the way back up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, more than a full decade after its original release, and squarely, unmistakably within the 1970s. Pickett had recorded the original track, with a then completely unknown session pianist named Leon Russell playing alongside him, years before Russell became a celebrated performer in his own right.
I was working in the lab late one night.
And the finished song was rejected outright by 4 different major record labels, before independent producer Gary Paxton finally decided to take a chance on releasing it himself through his own small label. By the time of its 1973 comeback, the single had gone on to sell millions of additional copies on top of its original run, cementing its place as one of the rare novelty songs to become a genuine hit not once, but twice, more than a decade apart. Pickett released several sequel songs trying to recapture the same magic, including Monsters Holiday, a Christmas-themed follow-up that reached number 30 in December 1962, though none of his later efforts ever matched the original's staying power. He continued performing the song at Halloween shows across the country for the rest of his life, remaining a beloved fixture of the holiday circuit right up until he passed away from leukemia in 2007 at the age of 69, having spent more than 4 decades tied to a single Halloween novelty record.
He did the mash.
He did the monster mash.
Number 10, The Streak by Ray Stevens.
Oh, yes, they call him the Streak.
Released in the spring of 1974, this comedic single became Ray Stevens' second #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, capitalizing directly on the sudden nationwide fad of streaking, in which people ran naked through public places for shock value or attention. The song is narrated by an excitable, slightly breathless local television news reporter describing a series of increasingly chaotic streaking incidents happening all around town that day, complete with a recurring, almost pleading warning to the listener at home to look away rather than actually watch what's unfolding on screen. Stevens wrote and recorded the song remarkably quickly once he realized the streaking fad, which had exploded across college campuses nationwide and even briefly interrupted the live 1974 Academy Awards broadcast when a streaker ran across the stage,
Oh, yes, they call him the Streak.
was likely to be short-lived, and his instinct paid off handsomely when the single sold over 5 million copies within just a few months of release. Stevens had already scored an earlier #1 hit back in 1970 with the far more sentimental, gospel-tinged Everything is Beautiful, making him one of the rare artists of that entire era, able to move comfortably back and forth between heartfelt, sincere ballads and pure comedic novelty songs without ever seeming to lose his audience along the way. The song remains one of the most direct examples of a novelty record capturing an extremely specific, fleeting cultural moment, one so tightly tied to its exact era that the streaking fad itself had largely faded from national headlines, again by the time the following year rolled around and moved on to some new trend.
His anatomy, he gon' give us a peek.
Number 9, Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille.
Muskrat Susie, Muskrat Sam.
Written and originally recorded by the Austin-based singer-songwriter Willis Allen Ramsey back in 1972 under the far less catchy original title Muskrat Candlelight, this soft, whimsical song about 2 amorous muskrats named Susie and Sam was first covered by the popular folk rock band America in 1973 for their album Hat Trick, though that particular version only reached number 67 on the Billboard Hot 100 at the time. Captain and Tennille, the husband and wife duo behind the massive Grammy-winning hit Love Will Keep Us Together, had already been performing their own version of the song regularly in their nightclub act for some time, complete with distinctive synthesizer sound effects meant to simulate the Muskrats' romantic encounter, and decided to include it on their 1976 album Song of Joy almost as an afterthought rather than a planned single.
Float like the heavens above.
Once a Madison, Wisconsin radio station reported an overwhelming, unexpected listener response to the album track. That fall, A&M Records rushed to officially release it as a proper single, and it climbed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 that fall. Despite reaching the top 5, the song has often been cited by music critics as one of the strangest hits of the entire decade, an oddly tender love song about 2 rodents that millions of ordinary listeners nonetheless embraced without much hesitation or embarrassment. The duo somewhat controversially performed the song for Queen Elizabeth II during a White House state dinner held in 1976, a choice that reportedly puzzled British royal staff who were entirely unfamiliar with American novelty pop and its particular sense of humor, and songwriter Willis Allen Ramsey, who never went on to release a proper second album despite decades of fan anticipation, has continued quietly collecting royalties from the song for decades as one of music's more mysterious and reclusive cult figures.
Looks like Muskrat Love.
Number 8, Disco Duck by Rick Dees and his cast of idiots.
Went to a party the other night.
Released in the summer of 1976, this novelty single, built around a distinctive duck-voiced vocal effect layered directly over an upbeat, danceable disco groove, became a surprise #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 that October, riding the massive, unstoppable wave of disco's mainstream popularity while simultaneously gently poking fun at the entire genre. Rick Dees, a working radio disc jockey based in Memphis, Tennessee at the time and looking to break into recording, put together the track using a kazoo-like effect pressed against his own throat to create the now distinctive duck voice. And he initially had real trouble getting the finished song played anywhere, since his own radio station's parent company refused to air it due to an unrelated conflict of interest with the record label distributing it. The song eventually broke through anyway, selling over 3 million copies nationwide and even prompting Disney's own lawyers to send a warning letter over the unauthorized quacking, apparently concerned about any implied connection to Donald Duck, though no formal lawsuit ever actually materialized from the dispute. Despite its massive commercial success, Dees never managed another major hit as a recording performer, though he went on to build a long and genuinely successful career as a nationally syndicated radio host for decades afterward, eventually hosting one of the single most widely broadcast morning radio shows anywhere in the country well into the 2000s, far outlasting the disco fad his own song had once gently poked fun at. Number 7, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer by Elmo Shropshire.
Grandma got run over by a reindeer.
Released in 1979, this dark comedic Christmas song, narrated entirely from the perspective of a young child matter-of-factly describing his grandmother's sudden death after being struck by one of Santa's reindeer while walking home from a family gathering on Christmas Eve, became an unlikely holiday radio staple almost immediately after its very first release. Written by songwriter Randy Brooks in the mid-1970s, who originally performed it himself at small country bars around the greater Los Angeles area, before Elmo Shropshire and his singing partner Patsy Trigg recorded the definitive, far better known version that would go on to become a genuine annual holiday classic. The song's cheerfully upbeat honky-tonk arrangement, complete with fiddle and steel guitar, stood in genuinely jarring contrast to its dark, morbid subject matter involving a grandmother's sudden, unexpected death.
She'd been drinking too much eggnog.
Several radio stations initially refused to play the song at all when it first arrived, understandably uncomfortable with its casual, matter-of-fact treatment of a grandmother's sudden and violent death right in the middle of the otherwise cheerful holiday season. But overwhelming listener demand eventually wore down that resistance and turned it into an annual fixture of Christmas radio rotation every December since. The song has since sold millions of copies across various re-releases over the decades and even inspired a full animated television special in 2000, proving that audiences were more than willing to laugh along with a genuinely dark joke as long as it came wrapped in a catchy, upbeat holiday tune. Shropshire himself worked as a practicing veterinarian for much of his life, alongside his ongoing music career, treating animals by day while performing novelty songs by night, and he continued performing the song live every single holiday season for decades afterward, often dressing up as Grandma herself, complete with a wig and apron, purely for comedic effect at his own concerts.
But as for me and Grandpa, we believe.
Number 6, Rock Lobster by the B-52s.
Lobster!
Originally released independently on a tiny local label called DB Records back in 1978, before being picked up, remixed, and re-released on a national scale by Warner Brothers Records, this quirky, high-energy new wave single, filled with yelping vocals and various sound effects meant to imitate an entire cast of sea creatures, became the Athens, Georgia band's breakthrough hit once it finally climbed onto the Billboard Hot 100 in 1980. The song's chaotic, high-energy delivery, built around lead singer Fred Schneider's rapid spoken word style, listing off an increasingly absurd parade of marine life, from lobsters to catfish to an entire school of jellyfish, made it stand out sharply and unmistakably from virtually anything else playing on mainstream radio at that particular moment. John Lennon later specifically cited the song as a direct inspiration for coming out of his own extended musical retirement, reportedly telling close friends that hearing something so strange, fresh, and genuinely new on the radio convinced him it was finally the right time to get back into the recording studio himself after years away. The track's odd, danceable energy helped establish the B-52s, formed in Athens, Georgia, back in 1976, and featuring dual female vocalists Kate Pearson and Cindy Wilson, alongside frontman Fred Schneider, as one of the defining bands of the entire emerging new wave scene, proving that a song built almost entirely around imitating a whole cast of sea animals could still become a genuine dance floor favorite, decades before ironic novelty songs became a common, expected internet phenomenon. Number 5, Fish Heads by Barnes and Barnes.
Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads.
Written and recorded by the comedy duo Barnes and Barnes, secretly composed of former child actor Bill Mumy, best known at the time for playing young Will Robinson on the original 1960s Lost in Space television series, and his childhood friend Robert Hamer. This absurdist novelty song first found a genuine audience in 1978 after being played on the nationally syndicated Dr. Demento radio show, which specialized in exactly this kind of oddball material. The lyrics consist almost entirely of a repeated, high-pitched sing-song celebration of fish heads, describing them cheerfully as roly-poly and delicious to eat, with almost no other narrative content whatsoever beyond that single, strange, endlessly repeated idea running throughout the entire brief but memorable track. A surreal, deliberately low-budget music video for the song, directed by a then-unknown future film actor named Bill Paxton, who would later star in films like Twister and Apollo 13.
Ask a fish head anything you want to.
And featuring radio host Dr. Demento himself in a small supporting role as a homeless man, aired on Saturday Night Live in December 1980, and later became one of the single most requested clips during the earliest days of MTV, helping the song build a genuine, devoted cult, following that extended well beyond its original modest radio audience on the Dr. Demento program. Despite never charting on the traditional Billboard Hot 100, Fish Heads remains, decades later, the most requested song in the entire history of the Dr. Demento program, a remarkable achievement for a track built entirely around a single, deeply strange idea. Mumy and Heimer had actually formed their duo years earlier, back in 1970, while both were still teenagers experimenting with a home tape recorder, producing numerous other oddball tracks, including one called Boogie Woogie Amputee that never found nearly the same audience or lasting cultural traction, and the small independent label Rhino Records eventually signed the pair specifically on the strength of this one unlikely, enduring cult favorite alone.
Heads, fish heads, eat them up, yum.
Number 4, Pac-Man Fever by Buckner and Garcia. Released in January 1982, This novelty single, built entirely around the sounds and gameplay of the wildly popular new arcade game. Pac-Man became an unexpected top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 that spring, capturing the era's rapidly growing national obsession with video arcades in musical form for perhaps the very first time on mainstream radio. Songwriters Jerry Buckner and Gary Garcia, working together as a duo out of Columbus, Ohio, wrote and recorded the track quickly and quite deliberately to capitalize on the game's overwhelming cultural dominance at that exact moment in early 1982, incorporating actual sound effects licensed directly from Pac-Man's manufacturer, Bally Midway, and lifted straight from the arcade cabinet itself into the finished studio recording. The accompanying full-length album, also titled Pac-Man Fever, went on to sell well over 1 million copies nationwide, featuring additional tracks dedicated to other extremely popular arcade games of the moment, including Donkey Kong, Frogger, and Centipede, essentially turning the entire record into an affectionate musical love letter to the early 1980s video arcade craze sweeping the country. Despite the massive, if fairly short-lived, success of the record, Buckner and Garcia never had another major hit of their own to follow it up, and the song has since become one of the most enduring musical time capsules of the entire early 1980s arcade gaming boom, still instantly recognizable decades later to anyone who grew up feeding quarters into a cabinet at the local mall, bowling alley, or pizza parlor. Number 3, The Safety Dance by Men Without Hats.
We can dance if we want to. We can leave your friends behind.
Released in 1982 and becoming a genuine major, hit the following year, eventually climbing to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. This Canadian new wave single, recorded by a Montreal-based band that took its own name from a satirical joke, became known almost as much for its bizarre, medieval-themed music video as for its infectious, synthesizer-driven melody that ended up dominating both dance floors and mainstream radio alike. Frontman Ivan Doroshuk has explained in numerous interviews over the years that he wrote the song after being unceremoniously kicked out of a Montreal nightclub for pogo dancing, a fast, jumping dance style popular in early punk scenes that the venue's bouncers considered too dangerous or disruptive for their otherwise orderly dance floor. Genuinely furious at what he saw as a needless, arbitrary restriction on how ordinary people were allowed to move on a dance floor, Doroshuk wrote the song as a defiant, almost anthemic celebration of dancing however one wanted to, entirely without permission or judgment from anyone, filming the accompanying video in a rural field populated by dwarves, jesters, and other medieval costumed characters that had virtually nothing at all to do with the song's actual, much more mundane origin story about a nightclub bouncer. The single became the band's only major American hit, but its strange visual presentation and genuinely defiant, freedom-minded message helped cement it as one of the most recognizable new wave anthems of the entire decade, later finding a whole new audience after being prominently featured in the 1998 comedy film The Wedding Singer, which introduced the song to an entire generation of younger viewers who had never lived through its original 1980s release. Number 2, The Curly Shuffle by Jumpin' the Saddle Band.
Doing the curly shuffle. Hey Mo, hey Mo.
Released in 1983 on the small independent Atlantic Records subsidiary label, this Chicago-based band's affectionate tribute to the classic comedy trio, the Three Stooges, became a surprise top 15 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 that same year. Built around an upbeat, horn-driven arrangement, that paid direct, loving homage to Curly Howard's exaggerated physical comedy routines from decades earlier. The song incorporated actual imitation sound bites and playful vocal effects, meant to closely mimic Curly Howard's signature "nuke nuke nuke" laugh, along with several other well-known catchphrases, scattered generously throughout the track, giving longtime fans of the decades-old comedy act an unexpected, genuinely fresh new way to celebrate their favorite performer on mainstream contemporary radio. Because the Three Stooges had experienced a significant, genuine resurgence in popularity through heavy afternoon syndicated television reruns throughout the 1970s and well into the early 1980s, introducing the classic comedy act to an entirely new generation of young viewers who had never seen the original theatrical shorts. The timing proved ideal for a song built entirely around nostalgic slapstick comedy references most listeners would immediately recognize. Jumpin' the Saddle Band, fronted by vocalist Frank Dell and formed originally as a bar band playing regular gigs around the Chicago club circuit, never had another hit approaching this one's success. But the song remains a beloved novelty staple decades later, still played today at fan conventions and other events celebrating the Three Stooges' enduring legacy within American comedy history.
We get up and dance and do the curly shuffle.
Number 1, Eat It by Weird Al Yankovic. Released in 1984 at the absolute height of Michael Jackson's Thriller-era fame, this direct note-for-note parody of Jackson's massive hit Beat It became Weird Al Yankovic's first major crossover success, climbing all the way to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 and eventually earning him his very first Grammy Award for Best Comedy Recording. Yankovic completely rewrote Jackson's original lyrics around the far more mundane, universally relatable theme of a frustrated parent trying to convince a picky, stubborn child to simply eat their dinner without endless complaint. And he went so far as to recreate the original song's now iconic music video almost shot for shot, right down to closely matching Jackson's exact choreography, dance moves, and even his distinctive red leather wardrobe. Because the parody required extensive cooperation and direct personal permission from Jackson's own management camp.
Don't wanna argue, I don't wanna debate.
Before it could move forward at all, Yankovic has said in interviews that he was genuinely surprised when Jackson personally approved the entire project himself, reportedly finding the whole concept genuinely funny and even flattering, rather than insulting in any way to his own original hit. The song's massive, unexpected success helped establish Yankovic as far more than a passing, one-time novelty act, launching a long-running parody career that would continue producing hit singles and platinum-selling albums for decades to follow, built almost entirely on his ongoing, remarkable ability to turn the biggest songs of any given era into something gleefully, endlessly ridiculous for a whole new audience each time. He had actually attempted a similar food-themed parody a year earlier with I Love Rocky Road, a play on Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll, but that earlier effort never came close to matching the sheer cultural impact and commercial success. Eat It would go on to achieve once Jackson's own blessing helped push it into the mainstream spotlight.
In Japan, so eat it, just eat it.
12 songs that somehow became genuine, chart-certified hits despite being built around dead skunks, amorous muskrats, and dancing seafood, proving that audiences living through the 70s and 80s were far more willing to embrace pure, unfiltered absurdity on their car radios than anyone looking back today might reasonably expect them to be. It's a reminder that sometimes the single strangest, most unlikely idea in the room turns out to be exactly what people didn't even realize they wanted to hear blasting out of their car radio on a long summer drive. If any of these songs brought back a memory you'd completely forgotten about, let us know down in the comments which one it was. And if you enjoyed this look back at music's weirdest, most improbable hits, give this video a like and subscribe for more deep dives into the strange, wonderful songs that quietly shaped the airwaves you grew up listening to, one novelty single at a time.